Do you ever dread playing technical passages in concertos and you have trouble getting them up to tempo? Or perhaps you get them up to tempo, but you don't feel quite comfortable yet, and your fingers don't feel quite relaxed and loose, and doesn't feel easy. And maybe you've tried methods like playing dotted rhythms and making sure your fingers don't press too hard, and practicing in chunks. And by themselves, those exercises are helping you, but then when you put the passage back together, something just doesn't feel quite right. Hey, this is Langerman from Violin Live, helping you along your musical journey. In this video, I'm going to give you a few very simple progressive exercises that will help develop your left hand agility and just hopefully help you feel a little bit more comfortable playing those quick passages, especially the ones with shifts. To break it down, the left hand action consists of vertical motions and horizontal motions. So the dropping and lifting of the fingers, that's your vertical motion, and sliding the finger and shifting, that's your horizontal motion. Of course, there's also lateral motion when you change from one string to the next. So that's for another video. Now, as beginners, a lot of students, they spend several years in first positions. It's not until they have learned several different finger patterns down here comfortably and play decently in tune that they finally start to learn how to shift. That includes myself, because I think I spent like 3 or 4 years just in first position. And it wasn't until I was a Suzuki kid, it wasn't until I got to Suzuki book 3 or 4 that I finally started learning how to shift and doing vibrato and whatnot. And when students finally learn how to shift, what do they spend a lot of time on? Doing these kind of exercises. Right? So the shifting motion is isolated. The problem is that if you do that for too long, it's going to create a problem when it's time to play passages that involve shifts, because in repertoire we need to combine the vertical and horizontal motions. We can't continue doing in isolation the shifting and schradik like we can't separate them so much like this, because at a certain point, this is going to become counterproductive. I mean, yes, schradik is great, it's one of my favorite exercises, but if you spend too long practicing separately the lifting and dropping of the fingers, and then practicing separately all of those shifts inside the passage, the skills that you're learning in isolation, they are no longer very useful, because when you put them together in integration, it feels different. It's going to feel different. So what we need to learn is how to integrate these two motions. So a couple examples in standard repertoire we can take out. There are so many examples. How about this passage from the beginning of Lalo's Symphony Espagnole, from the first movement? Or Don Juan, you know, that famous Haydn, that orchestral excerpt from Don Juan? So how can we better learn to integrate the vertical and horizontal motions? So let's break it down. The vertical motion, it comes from the bass knuckles, right? The lifting and dropping of the fingers. While the horizontal motion, it comes from the forearm when we have to do shifts, and also the elbow, actually. Especially if you're shifting to the high positions, we have to come around, and we have to do that in advance. I'm not going to talk too much about the elbow today in this video, but one of the best things you can do in your warm-up routine is to start practicing scales with only 2 fingers. So when we practice scales with 2 fingers, what's happening? Let's take E major, starting on the D string. So we have to shift quite frequently. If you're not comfortable playing on a single string yet, the scales, you can do the same exercise going across 2 strings. So like this. Shift, shift down. So in order to play these kind of scales well, we have to do these 2 exercises first. First, we're going to do trills. So trills, we're going to practice briefly, just briefly, the vertical motion between first and second finger, because I'm practicing the scale on these two fingers for now. So for example, I'm going to practice trills. You can use the examples from Simon Fischer's book if you're not sure how you want to practice the trills. There are some great exercises in Simon Fischer. You can do that. And you can do the same exercise also on the half step, because in these scales you'll have half steps and whole steps between the fingers. So briefly, just a couple minutes. And then the next step is to practice just the shifts from the scale. So for example, if I'm doing it on the same string, I'll go from first, third to fifth to seventh positions, right? And then you can combine the vertical and horizontal motions that I just practiced separately, but just for a short time, and we get the scale. Or whichever way you want to do it. So then you can repeat the same exercise using a different combination of fingers. So for example, 2 and 3. Let's say I'm doing I guess F sharp major scale. So as you can see, what's happening with these scales, because we're only using 2 fingers, we have to shift frequently, which means that the forearm, it doesn't get stuck in a single position. It's always activated. And because the fingers are always alternating, those fingers are always activated as well. So now we have a completely different feeling of that integration, which we really need in those passages. So now, how do we apply this concept in repertoire? So let's go back to the Lalo example. So what we want to do is first, we're going to find the places where the shifts happen. So we'll play the last note in the previous position and the first note in the new position. But we're not going to be stuck on those 2 notes. We're going to find all of them throughout the passage, and we're going to put them all together. So we're creating a skeleton. So, for example, our first shift is between E and G. The next shift is between E and G here. Then the next one's here. We can put these in at the end because of the extension. So we're going to practice it both up and down. And now do the same thing, but now we're going to create the shift quickly. We're going to group that together. Now, just be careful when you do it that you're not creating jerky motions. It should still feel nice and relaxed, but we're making it feel like one gesture, okay, for each one. Okay, one important thing to keep in mind, whenever you practice these passages under tempo, remember that it's only the tempo that changes. So the speed of the shift actually has to be quick, because in reality, when you get this up to tempo, the shifts, they're not going to be like, you're not going to do it this way in tempo, so don't practice it like this. So if you're doing the whole passage now, let's say put in all of the notes now, we can easily fill in the blanks now in each single position. So that's still quick. So if you do it under tempo, notice that the speed of the shift was the same as when I played it quicker. Okay, so, or quicker. So now let's go back to the skeleton and do quick shifts. And going back. Now, let's skip now to the next example. Our other example was Don Juan going up to that high D. Not a whole lot of shifts here, actually. This one is, I think Depends what fingering you do. Mine only has 2 shifts, all on the E string. I shift here to 1. Then here I shift from 3 to 1. I go 1 to 3 on top. So there are only 2 shifts. They're going from 2 to 1, and then from 3 to 1. So that's what to practice. I'll add the extension on top, because that's part of the extension. I kind of count them. And now quick. Now just notice one thing, when you have these type of shifts to practice, notice where the elbow has to be. You'll have to prepare it a little bit in advance, so keep that in mind. And now we can fill in the blanks with all the other notes. And now a little quicker. So when the elbow is prepared in advance, it becomes easier if you have to come around the bout of the instrument in something like this. Again, this video is not so much about the elbow, but if you practice those shifts as a skeleton, so remember, you're not isolating them, you're not going back and forth between the same 2 notes, because then that's where it becomes a little bit counterproductive if you do that too much. But we're taking the entire passage and we're getting a feel for the entire arm motion in all the different aspects, vertically and horizontal. You have to feel from beginning to the end. It becomes one gesture. All right, so that's it for today. I hope this video was helpful for you. If so, write down your biggest takeaway in the comment section below. Share this video with a friend or a colleague. If you would like a summary of all of my content in both video and written form in your inbox twice a month, sign up for my bi-monthly newsletter. It comes on the 1st and 15th of each month. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel, hit the notification bell, and happy practicing.